Great news on the economy. As a result of lifting the first lockdown, economic growth jumped up by a record-breaking 15%. But don't celebrate too soon. The economy is 8% smaller than it was pre-pandemic, and there is the small matter that we're back in lockdown. So hoping that these figures might mean a return to sustained economic growth and recovery for the country is a bit like hoping to reach your personal best in the London Marathon with both of your legs gaffer taped together. Now, we all accepted the first lockdown, most of us anyway, given the virus was an unknown quantity. We were told it would be a few weeks. Well, here we are in November, still embarked on what is at best a scientific experiment, a punt, a roll of the dice, a shot in the dark. But this time, we have more facts. Like the fact that lockdowns bring their own death toll. They bring colossal unemployment. They close businesses. They lead to mental health breakdown, as covered brilliantly yesterday in Dan's show. Lockdowns lead to a damaged and diminished country where poverty, inequality, deprivation and premature death will be baked into the system for decades. Remember, poverty kills. And this second lockdown is to choose more poverty. What makes this so unforgivable, and literally this is why I will not shut up, is that given the powers that we think we've accepted on this one, the data is suggesting that the cases of coronavirus were coming down before we actually locked down. We're breaking the news this evening on Drive that the national R rate is in a downward trajectory. Now, this is long before any of the effects of the current lockdown could have been felt. The R rate is coming down. The scientific advisors and the government either didn't do their due diligence on whether the catastrophically damaging second lockdown was required, or they ignored it. I can't decide which is worse, incompetence or willful destruction. The COVID death toll too high. Of course, every lost life, one too many, has become a political project at the expense of everything else. Human health, the economy, the very country itself. Now, this doesn't look like compelling evidence in terms of what motivated this second lockdown. Remember, the R rate is now coming down a week after lockdown, a week prematurely, perhaps. What seems to have happened is a policy not based on data and science, but an attitude of better safe than sorry. Well, that's not good enough for the people sat at home, courting suicidal thoughts, staring at bills they can no longer pay, crying for relatives they can't see, and suffering illness about which they are unaware or for which they cannot receive treatment. Now, to give him credit, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak has made it known to anyone that will listen that he has pushed back on these lockdown measures. But he's been outvoted by others in the cabinet who would likely see us locked down for many months to come. Our own Prime Minister, we're told, was bounced into the announcement of this second lockdown before he'd had a chance to make a final decision and to mull over the data. Now, there has been a lot of political air turbulence at number 10 in the last few days as a power struggle ensues. It seems the Vote Leave faction, led by Dominic Cummings and Lee Cain, have lost this battle for Downing Street. Now, Dom Cummings might be a strategic genius who led the successful Vote Leave campaign in 2016. He might be the author of Boris's extraordinary election result in December 2019. But since then, it has become clear that number 10 is simply not fit for purpose. Rumours of a Machiavellian, chaotic day-to-day operation have emerged. U-turns every 10 minutes, including the easily avoided fallout from picking an unwinnable fight with footballer Marcus Rashford over school meals in the holidays. And of course, Cummings' own absurd hypocrisy when he flouted the spirit of lockdown rules when he went to Barnard Castle for that infamous psych test. How dare he make the Prime Minister suffer political damage for that? He should have gone then. And how can a Prime Minister with an astonishing 80-seat majority be anything other than a hero to his own backbenchers? Instead, they're mobilising against him. There's a civil war going on within the Conservative Party months after a historic victory. It's extraordinary. So with Cummings and his coterie of swivel-eyed mavericks and lunatics gone, what better opportunity for Boris to reset the agenda, to win back the millions of people who voted for him, and to show some of the bulldog spirit embodied by his own hero, Winston Churchill. And here's what Boris needs to do. He needs to reshape the balance of opinion in the SAGE committee that advises the government. He needs to hear from lockdown cheerleaders, sure, no problem with that, but also the lockdown skeptics. And he owes it to the country to at least consider and reflect on the possibility of a different path. And he needs to learn from recent history. The Welsh lockdown has been a farce since day one. Do you remember when they stopped people buying oven trays at Tesco's? Well, more seriously, the cases in Merthyr Tydfil have exploded and are among the highest in the country. It's nearly like national lockdowns don't make a difference. The voices of dissent within Parliament, disappointingly not coming from the opposition Labour Party, but from the Tory backbenches, are growing in volume. They have formed a group called the COVID Recovery Group, and they are growing in number. They may soon cancel out Boris's handsome majority. Why are they doing this? Because they are seeing the damage of lockdown at first hand. They are receiving the tearful phone calls, emails and letters from their constituents. They're looking at the appalling economic devastation. And some of them are daring, whisper it, to look at the data. And whilst the COVID-19 virus is extremely nasty and highly infectious, the strategy of committing suicide for the fear of death, which is what lockdowns are, has got to stop. So Boris, this is your chance to be the author of the real Great Reset, the reset of your administration, to show courage, to show empathy, to be the guy that millions of people voted for, and to move on from this obsessive, at all costs, exclusive focus on COVID-19 and to end this second lockdown now. If you give businesses and the public warning and you just chop the lockdown in half, ending it, I suggest, a week today, you will halve the damage to the economy. You'll halve the damage to people's lives and livelihoods. You will arrest the spiralling debt. You will save lives because we know the non-COVID death toll is so much higher. It's been said by others, and I think it's true, that in a sense this is a war because our country faces a mortal threat that goes beyond coronavirus. And as it's a war, this is your chance, Boris, to show that you are a wartime leader. Your eccentric general, Dominic Cummings, has gone. And so it falls to you to lead from the front, end this devastating second lockdown early and rescue the legacy of your time in office. And if you do so, your time in office might be longer than you ever dreamed. This is Talk Radio.